Hello, I'm with the Reverend Claire Wimbush, who is a chaplain resident at the VA in Durham. Welcome, Claire. And the Reverend Meg Burkle-Hunn, who is the Assistant Director at Christ Church here in Raleigh. Both Claire and Meg are members of the Bishop's Committee on Accessibility. And they are here with Willow, who is Claire's service dog and also assists Claire in her ministry at the VA and is a therapy dog as well. And as you can see, Willow is quite comfortable with us. Again, welcome to you all.
Thank you.
You may remember several months ago, the Bishop's Committee on Accessibility invited the diocese to fill out a survey to identify some of the needs for accessibility and inclusion, both physical accessibility and inclusion, but also social and communal accessibility and inclusion. The result of that survey has led the committee to engage in some work, and I wanted you all to tell us a little bit about the next steps, because you've listened carefully to what the diocese said. What's the next step?
So from our survey, we learned that most worshiping communities and churches wanted to be educated in disability awareness, as well as have a tool that they could actually use to determine evaluate how accessible their facilities and their programs and their worship are. And so we have created a self-audit for each worship community, each parish to complete on their own. And that is attached with this issue of Please Note.
So the idea is that a rector or vicar and vestry or mission committee would sit down and do a self-audit. Is that the idea?
Yes, that's the idea. And there'll be areas where the church is accessible and areas where it is probably not as accessible. And our hope is that the vestry will then address those areas that need some action. And our committee has compiled a list of resources that are available on our webpage to assist in parishes and worship communities in becoming more accessible.
Meg, what are some examples of the kind of questions that are on the audit?
Well, there's a lot of questions, as you might guess, about the exterior, the parking spaces, the interior of the church. But then there's also questions that we hadn't even considered until one of our committee members, who has 2 children with physical disabilities, brought up the issue of playground equipment, and if a playground is accessible to wheelchairs, or if there's toys or equipment that are suitable to children who have disabilities. And so there's questions that span the whole area of parish life and community.
I'm looking at, for example, under meeting rooms interior, one question, is the microphone low enough so as not to impede lip reading?
Right.
There's really a lot of common sense kind of things,
yes.
but you wouldn't think about them unless somebody identified. So this really is a tool that congregations can actually use to kind of figure out how they can become more accessible and welcoming. Now, both of you have gotten involved in this work, I suspect for various reasons, but I'm curious what some of those are, and how did you get here? Claire?
Well, I am here because I went to school at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, which, as you may know, was built about 300 years before anybody thought of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I went to chapel every week, in a chapel that was built in about 1715. Lots of steps! And I used an outdoor lift to get in. But one week in the middle of Lent in my junior year, the lift broke. And I thought, well, that's a pain. I can't get to worship. So I decided to go home and pray alone in my room. Except I didn't really pray, I just sulked. So the next week, I asked one of my friends, would they please ask the chaplain to bring the Eucharist to me, and I would wait at the steps outside the church. And when I got to the church on that Tuesday, I remember it was the rainy Tuesday before Palm Sunday. It was dreadful weather, and they had, in strict defiance of all college regulations, they had thrown the doors of the church open, so that when I sat at the bottom of the steps, I could see the whole sweep of the nave up to the altar, so I could worship with them. And I watched our priest make all the familiar gestures of blessing and consecration, and then I watched him take the body and blood of Christ out from behind the altar and walk down the nave into the steps to bring them to me. And I thought, that's what priests do. That's what the church does, and that's what I need to do with my life. So, 6 years later, here I am, an ordained transitional deacon, just because somebody opened the doors to the church. So,
Claire, thank you.
thank you.
And that's what this work and the work of this committee is about. Meg, Claire, and Willa, thank you. And thank you. God bless you.